Hello everybody, it's Ryan Liberty. In this video, we're going to discuss how to keep an emotional abuse journal. Okay, so let's get into how to keep an emotional abuse journal. I just want to say before we get started here that since we are discussing abuse, if that triggers you in some way, if you don't want to hear about that right now, then that's okay. Just turn the video off and you can come back to it later when you're feeling a little bit better. Maybe you don't feel like you can ever handle that topic. That's also okay. So, you don't have to watch this video. That's all right. Since we're talking about emotional abuse, I do like to always make the point that emotional abuse is something we all kind of do a little bit here and there throughout our lives. It's when it becomes a consistent pattern over time, day in, day out, that it would be considered emotional abuse. So this journal will actually help you to sort out exactly what's going on, which is great, but I like to make that distinction. And also, if you find that you are in an abusive situation, there is always help available. You've got helplines, you've got resources with your friends and your family, maybe you've got a school counselor, a therapist. There are tons of places that you can get help from people, online support groups, so please look for that help, use it, it's there for you. People want to see you out of that abusive situation, or at least having support while you're going through it. So I urge you to find that help and take advantage of it. So that out of the way, let's get into how to keep an emotional abuse journal. I've got notes as always because I don't like to just head into these things talking off my mouth, so let's just talk about quickly some benefits of keeping an emotional abuse journal, because it's not really like a thing, an emotional abuse journal, but I think it's very helpful to keep a journal of emotional abuse. So here's why. For one thing, like any journal, it gets the thoughts out of your head, and it's instead of them just swirling around and getting confused, now you have a record on paper or on an electronic record, however you're doing it. And then it's not just this constant thing you're mulling over. You took it out of your head and now it's somewhere else, and you don't have to remember it, you don't have to worry over it because it's somewhere else. And then it also helps you to slow down your thoughts when you write it out. When we're thinking in our head, things can go really fast and they can be shifting around really quickly. When you have to sit down and write it down in sentences, it just kind of slows your thought process down a little bit. It slows down your thinking, and it helps you to kind of even calm yourself as you think through things. It makes it a little easier to think through what's going on. It can also, because it slows you down, help you access some of those deeper feelings underneath your thoughts that you may not be experiencing. Sometimes we get very caught up in our head, and getting caught up in our head kind of protects us from feeling some of the stuff that we don't want to feel. But once we start to write it down, we start to make more sense out of it. We can access some of those more painful feelings, which may not sound very appealing, but sometimes we need to go through those feelings to start to heal, to start to make sense of what's going on. So keeping a journal will help you to access some of those feelings. That's a good thing. Also, it helps us to keep a record of what's going on, of course, and when we have a record of what's going on, we can start to see if there's a pattern. So if we feel like we're being emotionally abused by a specific person, if it's something that happens every once in a while, we can see that. We can start to say, well, maybe they're not abusing me, but there's something a little not so great going on here. But if we see that as something that's going on every day, something that happens multiple times a day, then we can be a little bit more sure that this is emotional abuse. And I say this because one form of emotional abuse is gaslighting, and I do have a video on gaslighting. But very briefly, gaslighting is specifically designed, intentionally or not intentionally, it's designed to get you questioning yourself and questioning what's going on. So if you have a record of it, it can't be so questioned because you've written it down and you know exactly what's happening. Now, something else to say about all of this is that this could be shared with a therapist, of course, and you may want to discuss this before even starting a journal. If a therapist thinks this is a good idea for you, it may not be appropriate for everybody. But if there is something that's been going on in your life and you haven't been comfortable sharing it with a therapist, you may feel more comfortable writing it down in a journal, and then you may have enough courage to, because I know it's very hard to talk about these things sometimes, you may have enough courage, if you can't say it out loud to the therapist, to at least write it down and then say to the therapist, look, I wrote it down, and I want to give this to you to read. Would that be okay? And sometimes that's a way that we can communicate without having to say it right there in the moment, face to face, because I know that can be very intense when we're talking about an abusive topic. So it's good to have that purpose also for having a journal. So just some guidelines on having a journal when we're talking about emotional abuse. It's something you want to make sure that is confidential and safe. You don't want to be doing this somewhere where you feel like somebody could easily hack into it and get it. You want to make sure there's a lock on it in some way, or it's somewhere that you can keep safe and locked up. Maybe don't tell people that you have this journal, just to make sure that nobody's going to steal it from you or something. Just because you're going to be writing private, personal things in there, and if it falls into the hands, especially of the person who's abusing you, they're going to use that in some way to try to harm you more. So just for your own protection, just think about that before you move into creating any kind of a journal. How can you keep this secure, private, and confidential? And then also think about who you would want to share that with. I would recommend try not to share that journal with many people at all, just with people who you can trust, especially somebody like a therapist. So that's, the first thing I want to say here. Next thing is just, what do you write in the journal? So these are the things that I would recommend that you write in a journal. You should write down the date that something happened. You should write down who was involved. What was it that you needed? This may not always apply, but sometimes emotional abuse happens after we make a request or we try to voice ourselves. So you may want to say what was it that I was asking for? What was it that I needed in that moment? How did I ask for it? And then what happened? What actually happened between me and this other person? How did you feel when that happened? And then how did you react in turn to what they did? And then finally, what could you have done differently? And now I don't say I think this is important to have this in there. What could you have done differently? But I don't want you to put it in there to feel ashamed about your reaction, to feel like you had any way that you could have prevented the abuse. That is not what this is about. I don't want you to feel like a victim blaming in any way here. But it can be good to give you a little bit more control and power over the way you approach the situation the next time. Because sometimes there are things we can do, like setting boundaries, and I have a video on setting boundaries. But there are things we can do to protect ourselves from the abuse a little bit more. So if we take the time now when we're in a safe environment and we're thinking through our thoughts to think about what it is that we might be able to do to protect ourselves better, this would be a good time to do it while we're fresh and thinking about how we felt and how we reacted and everything. But again, it's not to make you feel ashamed and not to make you at all feel like you could have prevented what happened. So those are the things that I recommend that you put in the journal. And I also want to say that it's not something that you should use to justify your position or to try to make somebody else feel bad about the things that they did. Just use it to be, as objective as you can, just to think things through, get in touch with your own feelings, and to explore what's going on. Try to be curious about the situation. Try not to judge what's going on in advance, and that will help you get everything out nice and clearly. And then, later on, when you have a nice collection of what's been going on, you can start to see more clearly what's going on. So I wanted to give you just a couple of examples of things that you might write in a journal. So, for example, 9:30 p.m. Friday, my daughter told me that I was a fat cow. I got angry and I yelled at her, and next time I could tell her if she continues to speak to me that way, then she won't be allowed to borrow the car for a month. That could be one entry. Another entry could be, this morning before work, I asked my husband why he didn't put the laundry away. He said he did, but I saw that it was still in the machine when I walked down the stairs. I was confused and I felt sad. I felt distanced from him, so I didn't say anything. Maybe next time I could tell him that I saw it in the machine and see what he says. Another entry might be something like, my teacher made a joke about me in front of class today. I felt embarrassed and I told them that it wasn't nice. She laughed at me, so I'm going to talk to the counselor tomorrow about it. So just some quick examples of things you might want to write in your journal. Really do what feels right for you, what feels comfortable for you. It's really about you. It's your journal. Again, just make sure that it's something that's protected and private for your use only, and you get to decide who you share that with and who you don't share that with. But if you've had any experience writing a journal like this, I'd love to hear what you do and how you keep it so that you could share your experience with the rest of the people here who are also looking for help. So please leave that down below, and I thank you for taking the time to learn about how to keep an emotional abuse journal with me today. Hey, it's Ryan Liberty. If you like that video, please give it a thumbs up, share with a friend, and leave any questions or comments down below because that would really help me out. If you're somebody who's gone through a traumatic event and you're feeling cut off from the people around you, I have a free course that will help with that, so please click to get it. And if you'd like to see the rest of my videos, please click subscribe. As always, I want to remind you that your life matters. Nobody can question your worth. However it is that you're feeling, whatever it is that you're going through, it's okay and you are loved. Thanks again for watching.